All right, welcome in. No name to this. It's the first rendition of it. I am Mitch. He is Eddie Presti. If you're a member of Knicks Twitter, you certainly know Eddie's name. I believe there's an underscore at the end of the tag on Twitter. He is hosting Knicks Twitter Spaces all off season long. Eddie, we're going to talk Knicks off season, summer league, cover everything, check a bunch of boxes here today. I don't know how you do it in the off season because I feel like if you're hosting daily Knicks Twitter Spaces during the season, it's more simple because it's like, hey, cover the game that was played.
Right.
And then if there's an off day, it's like, let's just recap again, but also preview what's coming up next, who's next on the slate. The off season, you got to dig deep. In your spaces too, like I'm in them every night you have them. They're not like a half hour to an hour long. These things end up going like 4, 5, 5.5 hours long. So it's certainly a grind, and I salute you for doing that for the Knicks community.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Look, man, people want to talk Knicks, especially now because the Knicks are they're championship contenders. So they're all in and people want to talk about it. And no matter what, every day there's always something to talk about. Always. There's always a topic to talk about every day. And even if it's redundant, people still want to talk about it. So I'm going to do this as long as I can. Unless the Mets really go on like a sick run, then I'm going to have to pivot a little bit. But I'm going to still try to do it no matter what. Even if it's just an hour and a half, 2 hours, I will try to do it every single night.
So for those who are regulars for your Twitter Spaces, the first part of this, maybe they've already heard you say it a few times, but what have you made for those who are just tuning into this video and getting familiarized with it? What have you made of the Knicks offseason? I think obviously the two biggest things were the Mikal Bridges trade, the acquisition of him from Brooklyn, and then the departure of Isaiah Hartenstein to Oklahoma City. I know, not to steal your thunder, you were big on them potentially getting DeRozan. Was that more of you seeing DeRozan as like the guy, or was it because you thought a Bridges trade was more pie in the sky than potentially realistic?
Okay, so I was never against the Bridges trade. I looked at things from a cost analysis. So the reason I wanted DeRozan was because I knew he wasn't going to cost your entire future. I knew it was we probably could have given him those 2 protected picks, Bojan, and sign him for 3 years. I thought he was going to get more than 25 million or whatever it was, 3 years, 74 million. I thought he was going to get about 30 if he would have come to New York. But I was willing to do that because I wanted to have some ammo because there's always another move to be made, right? So what people don't understand is, yes, a lot of people say, fuck them picks, right? And I understand where they're coming from, fuck them picks. Like that's the narrative. But fuck them picks is kind of a stupid thing to say because the picks are currency. It's the picks and players are what get you upgrades on your roster. So if, God forbid, Julius Randle goes down or Mitchell Robinson goes down, we have no more picks left to trade after that Mikal Bridges trade. We only have 2 protected picks and pick swaps. And that's it for the next 7 or 8 years. So that's why I would have rather got DeRozan and traded for him because we still would have had all our picks and we would have had a number 2 scorer. And now that after the Isaiah Hartenstein thing, now we could have went out and got Walker Kessler, no problem. Could have easily made a deal for him. But now it's going to be really hard to get a backup center or a starting center here, especially when we have Mitchell Robinson on this team.
And this is not a hindsight 2020 thing. Eddie was preaching about the DeMar DeRozan thing well before free agency started. And the reason I bring up hindsight being 2020, Eddie, is because you kind of hit the nail on the head. DeRozan goes to the Kings in a sign and trade for scraps. And now there were rumors I saw as early as like this afternoon, on Monday, we're recording this, that they were intrigued potentially with trying to get Kyle Kuzma for 2 first-round add to the Sacramento roster as well. And I know Kuzma was a name that was thrown around in a lot of your Twitter spaces early on in the process before the Mikal trade. So I think you were looking at, you don't, I don't want to speak for you. You don't hate the acquisition of Mikal Bridges.
No.
You're uncomfortable for what they had to give up, knowing that that's essentially your last big move here for the next handful of years.
Correct. I mean, if you look at it, the Knicks probably could have added both DeRozan, Kuzma, and a center, and a starting caliber center, say Walker Kessler. what team's better? Kuzma, DeRozan, Walker Kessler, or Mikal Bridges and no backup center to Mitchell Robinson?
Yeah, it's tough. And the center spot is something that we've talked about and that you've brought up as like a head topic point the last week now, I think. Well, basically since
iHeart left.
Since iHeart went to OKC. I trust that this front office has a plan in place. I mentioned on your space, I think it was a few nights ago, I trust the front office, but it almost has to come somehow via trade, because if you look at what's left at the center position for free agency, I don't even think it's scraps. It's like whatever is below calling it scraps. There were people last week, Eddie, in your spaces clamoring, maybe not clamoring, but there were people in favor of like, hey, let's give James Wiseman a shot. Let's give Thomas Bryant a shot. Those two guys are now off the board. I saw you tweet out earlier the idea of DeMarcus Cousins. One thing I love when you send out those graphics and you make a proposal, Eddie, and you say yes or no, there are people who think that you're sending those out under the premise of Eddie loves this idea.
Right.
Here's DeMarcus Cousins. They're not realizing you're just doing it to try to start a little dialogue and see where Knicks fans are at with this potential option. Because I always scroll through the replies, and there's always a bunch of them that I'm reading. Yeah. It's like these people think that Eddie's bringing this about because it's what Eddie wants to do. And I noticed the DeMarcus Cousins one, but again, it got my mind rolling to think like, if there were people asking for Wiseman last week, Thomas Bryant last week, those guys are gone, and now we're bringing up DeMarcus Cousins, like it's a somewhat dire situation to try to address that number 2 center spot.
I mean, we spoke about it last night in the space. This is a guy, DeMarcus Cousins. Listen, I think he's been blacklisted by the NBA. I don't know why. He's got a lot of behavior issues attached to him. He's got kind of a bad reputation around the league. But if you just look at what he did 3 years ago in the 21-22 season, he averaged 9 points and 5.5 rebounds in 9 minutes a game. I mean, that's pretty impressive. Now, again, this is 3 seasons ago. We don't know what kind of shape he is. He's playing in Puerto Rico. I threw it out because he's out there. I mean, you could probably give this guy a not even a guaranteed contract. Just invite him to training camp, see what he could do. If he could do something, great. If he doesn't, you can waive him.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing that out there, not only to take the temperature on Knicks fans and how they feel, but also just to see how people feel about it, right? You know what I'm saying? And you'll see in the replies, people think it's me actually saying, go get DeMarcus Cousins.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that. I'm asking you, would you do it? Yes or no? Very simple. It's a simple question. But people look at it like, this is what I want.
Yeah.
What I truly wanted this offseason, I wanted DeMar DeRozan, and I wanted to keep our picks. But I would have traded for Mikal Bridges. I certainly would have. I probably would have gave up 4 unprotected, but that 5th one, that Milwaukee pick, I would have tried to keep, because that I know especially after the iHeart thing, the Knicks would have had another move to make.
Yeah.
That's where I stood on that. But I love the Mikal thing. I love it. He's a perfect fit.
100%. He's an absolute perfect fit. I don't even think, like, when you say perfect fit, a lot of people just point to the Villanova thing. I think push that aside. The roster fit is perfect as well, having Bridges in line with what is projected to be right now the rest of the starting 5 for the Knicks. But the backup center spot, I know it's been a hot topic, especially for Knicks Twitter and in your spaces particularly. Some people might like roll their eyes, be like, yeah, whatever, it's the backup center spot. Like, how valuable is it for a team that's knocking on the door right now, a championship contention for the next few years, and you just lost iHeart? I love Mitchell Robinson. I'm a big Imrob fan, but the durability questions are more than valid. That's why it's such a big issue for the Knicks, is because it's not a guy like Bridges who's never missed an NBA game. With Mitch, you're kind of crossing your fingers and hoping for what, like 60, 65 games in the regular season, healthy going into the postseason would be tremendous, but there's no guarantee of that. So a guy like Walker Kessler, like you bring up, to me is a tremendous idea. I just don't know how working with Danny Ainge, I don't see that as a overly viable option. But then again, I didn't think they'd be able to work with Brooklyn on a Mikal Bridges trade, and that happened. But I think some people, when they hear backup center, they're like, well, who cares? Well, if you roll in right now what you have, and Precious Achua is still out there. But right now it's Mitchell Robinson, Jericho Sims, and the guy they took with the 58th pick.
Yeah.
If you roll that into the regular season and Robinson were to go down early, then it becomes a major hole and a major problem for the Knicks. That's why it's kind of taking precedent. And I think on top of that, Eddie, and I'll let you answer this part as well. To me, the backup center spot or the 1-1A with Imrob, if you do get a guy like Walker Kessler, to me, it's the last piece. It's the last thing for them to, check the offseason box and say, we just did kind of everything we were hoping for going into the summer.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, with the whole Mitchell Robinson thing, we know the injury. We know the injury history. We know the games played logged. And the bottom line is what the Knicks had with iHeart Mitchell Robinson was perfect because iHeart was a guy that was able to come in. And when we first got him, he wasn't good. Like, he wasn't good for the first 3 months. He was terrible. But then he got better and better, and he got more comfortable in the role. And then this last season, he basically took off, and he got better in all areas of the game, and he got himself paid. But when you have Mitchell Robinson as your starting center, that's great if he plays. But he's a guy I don't expect to play 60 games. I expect 40, 50 games if you're lucky. So the Knicks really have to find a guy that's not only a backup center, but that could be a starting center if you need him to be. And that's why I bring up Walker Kessler. But the only way we're going to be able to get Walker Kessler is by giving up Deuce McBride and those 2 protected picks. I think that could get it done. But I think Danny Ainge would probably have to move Jordan Clarkson in order to make that move. I think if Danny Ainge starts clearing house and trades Markkanen, trades Clarkson, I think he'd be open to taking a Deuce McBride and literally starting over with all those picks they have and a nice young roster. Because clearly, if they trade Markkanen, they're going for, the tankathon. So we'll see what they're going to do. I love Kessler. I think it'd be a perfect fit. I think he's a guy that plays. I think he can fit Tom Thibodeau's system, and he fits what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I know some people might say, well, Walker Kessler's super young. He's entering his 3rd year. He could be part of that rebuild in Utah. I do think it's an interesting case study with them. He started, if you look at, games started first year to second year, it dipped down 12% for him. And they did go out and they took Philip Kowski, the center from Duke, with like the 2nd or 3rd pick in the 2nd round this year. And just reading some, stories on like Jazz, not message boards, but like their fan pages and stuff like that, it almost sounds like second half of the year post All-Star break, he fell out of favor from that, those heavy minutes at times. So I don't think it's a situation where Utah's like, it's going to take a treasure chest worth of, picks and whatever else to get Walker Kessler. I just don't know if Danny Ainge takes Deuce, and I believe the 2 picks you're talking about are the Detroit protected and the Washington protected. If he does, great. I mean, I'd miss Deuce, but then you maybe go out there and try to get Kyle Lowry on the cheaper. You trust the rookie Tyler Kolek. I don't know. The hole right now is the backup center spot. And I do think if you got a guy like Walker Kessler, and I say like Walker Kessler, it's pretty much Walker Kessler because I don't know who else is out there right now.
You could throw in some pick swaps too in that deal too.
Yeah. Eddie would view it almost as like a 1-1A. I think he has that capability with, and that's not a negative to Mitchell Robinson. I just think Walker Kessler can be a guy where you look at that center spot and you're like, we have a good 1-1A, not a 1 and a clear number 2, right, which is what the case is kind of going on right now.
It's Kessler's the guy we need. Basically, that's what we need. We need basically another iHeart and a guy that's going to step in and just, obviously if Mitch is healthy, he's probably going to start over Kessler. But Mitch, you want to load manage him, and you got a guy like Kessler that comes in, and he does a lot of what Mitch can do. You know what I'm saying? So I think it'd be a perfect fit. And if you have to throw in some pick swaps to get it done, so be it. Just get it done. We already traded all our picks anyway. You might as well just put the chips all in at this point.
100%. There's no looking back now. One other option and then we'll get to summer league stuff. One other option I saw a couple of people bring up in your space that I was adamantly against was the name Vucevic, Chicago, Nikola Vucevic. The only reason I was against it is because the idea was brought up you'd be trading Mitchell Robinson to Chicago. That doesn't solve anything.
No.
In my opinion. You get someone back in Vucevic who's more available than Mitchell Robinson, but the hole right now is not no one's looking at Robinson like, oh my gosh, he's a terrible center, he can't play. it's availability with him, but the issue is what's behind him. So
Right.
if you get Vucevic, you're still sending out Robinson, a starting center, so you still have the vacancy at the backup spot. So I know that was one idea that was brought up a couple times in your space on Sunday, and I was shaking my head because I don't think it solves the riddle of what is going on right now that they need to figure out.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because again, you have to give up Mitch to get Vucevic. And I like Vucevic, but I don't like him without Mitch.
Yeah,
Right? Like if
100%.
I had Mitch and Vucevic, I'd be okay with that, right? Because you could stagger their minutes, start Mitch, put Vucevic in as a backup. He could almost be a stretch five, play with the second unit, and actually add some offense to that second unit, be a stretch five. I think that would work. But we don't have the salary to send out unless you're willing to trade, I mean, you want to trade Dante for Vucevic? I'm not doing that. So
No.
it doesn't really make sense. The only way it makes sense if the team that trades for Vucevic cuts him, like they were saying, they cuts him and you could sign him for nothing. Then sign me up.
Oh, 100%. 100%. So that is kind of the last piece, I think. Most Knicks fans would probably agree. You got to figure out what's going on behind Robinson at center. We'll as no name first rendition of it on the YouTube channel. Eddie Presti here, Eddie Presti _ on Twitter, hosts a ton of Knicks Twitter spaces during the offseason. They get a little ruckus once in a while. You got Tony in there, and when State joins, I love when those two just go at it. That's when I sit back and just kind of listen for a few minutes. Pivoting to Summer League, I'll give you the floor first.
Okay.
I just hope you don't say the guy that I'm circling. Who are you most looking forward to and watching? Last year was almost like nothing because the Knicks didn't have any draft picks for Summer League. This year, at least there's 4 fresh faces in there for New York. Is there 1 or 2 that
Rokas?
Maybe a little more giddy to see? Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Rokas is the guy I want to see because if he could show something, again, I'm putting my general manager hat on. If he shows something in the Summer League, he then becomes a trade chip, right? So again, I want to win a championship this year. I want to put all my chips in. We already traded all our picks. Now, if this guy Rokas comes here and lights up the Summer League, well, maybe then he could go in a deal for Walker Kessler. Maybe we could throw him in. I don't give a shit what he does. If he's productive and does what he could do, then I'm just looking to ship him off. So to me, that's going to be one of the biggest guys. And a lot of people talk so highly about this guy, and we've heard about him for years now.
Oh, yeah.
So it's finally going to be good to see this guy and see what he can actually do. So I'm hoping he lights up the Summer League because I'm going to look to trade him. That's all I care about. I don't really care about what he could bring because at the end of the day, I mean, we have Deuce, we have Brunson. We don't really need a point guard. And if we have to trade Deuce, that's so be it. There's other guys we could get on the market. So I'm hoping Rokas could do well. I'm also interested into seeing what's the kid they got that they just signed in the second round, the point guard?
Tyler Kolek.
Kolek. That's the other guy I'm looking forward to see because I really think that guy reminds me of TJ McConnell.
The lefty version, yeah.
Yeah, he's like a lefty and he's like a awkward kind of a white guy, but he's a hustler and he can make these awkward shots. So I'm looking forward to seeing him. I think he's going to be a piece. I think he's a keeper too.
Yes. So my guy was Kolek. I'm a bit biased. I watch a ton of Big East basketball. I've been to the last 5 or 6 Big East tournaments with the only gap being the COVID year. They started the tournament the COVID year and then they called the game at halftime and were like, yeah, no, all these other tournaments were getting canceled. They tried playing through it. And then at halftime, one of their games were like, no. So that was I do watch a ton of Big East basketball. So I'm a bit biased, but Kolek to me was such a good fit for the Knicks if he were to be in a spot down the road, Eddie, where he gets in with that second unit because he's not a point guard that's me. It's like, I need to find my shot. I'm looking for my shot. He's such a good maestro facilitator. I don't really want to say game manager, but he calms the waters if they get a little rocky, and he's so good at distributing to teammates. And if you look at the Knicks' second unit right now, that's a second unit that's right now has DiVincenzo. It's got Josh Hart on it. Like, there aren't necessarily going to be like a ton of shots to maybe go around if you're part of that second unit, but he's not the point guard that needs to go in there and chuck. So I think he's a good fit. Defense is certainly the question mark for me with him. But
Right.
offensively, I think if he were to be in a spot, if Deuce ended up getting sent in a trade, like we were hypothetically speaking for Walker Kessler, I think Kolek's he's an older college player too.
Yeah.
I think he's a plug and play for 8 to 10 minutes. He's not going to be overwhelmed if he were to get 8 to 10 minutes a night to spell Jalen Brunson. So I know
Do you
all these
think Tibbs
reports.
will like him?
What was that?
Do you think Tibbs will like him?
Oh yeah, he strikes me as a Tibbs guy. He's a pit bull, very relentless. One funny thing with him was they won the Big East tournament 2 years ago. They beat UConn in the semifinals and then blew out Xavier in the Big East championship at the Garden. And at the end of the year, they had like team pictures, with the Big East regular season trophy, the Big East tournament championship trophy. I think he had like a net around his neck, and he had the Big East tournament ring. And for his picture, he just flipped off the camera. Like that's his personality, though. Like he will get under your skin. I almost love the McConnell comparison too much that you threw out there. I hadn't heard that comparison yet, but when you said it and I got the gears turned, I was like, oh my gosh, he's like the left-handed version of TJ McConnell because he will absolutely get under the skin of the opposing team. He is one of those guys, I think, like McConnell, Eddie, where if he's on your team, you're like, this is incredible, this is great. If he's not on your team and you're going up against him, it's not like, oh my God, this guy's going to drop 30, but it's like, this dude is so goddamn annoying.
Right.
He's like a pest. You just want him to go away. So the fit for a Tom Thibodeau system and what Tom Thibodeau wants in his players, I think it's perfect. Again, will we see him on the floor rookie year? Probably not if you have Brunson and Deuce, but down the road, and I know they gave him a 4-year deal. I think the 4th year is an option.
Right.
I love the draft pick. And keep in mind, they moved up 4 spots, but gave up, I think, 3 future second rounders to take him. So clearly someone or multiple people in the front office were enamored with him.
Yeah, listen, I like it. I look forward to seeing what he could do. So let's hope, if he could be a TJ McConnell, even that type, Alex Caruso type of guy, trying to think who else they could compare him to. But
yeah, Caruso's more defensively gifted. I like the McConnell. It's not like Kolek is like a terrible defender because the energy's always there.
Right.
He's feisty. He just, when you talk about, moving your feet quickly and
he's an awkward white guy.
Yeah,
100%. He's an awkward white guy.
100%. We'll finish up here. I had it on the notes. Thought we'd bring it up briefly. I know we exchanged a text or two about it. What'd you make of the Johnny Bryant departure going to Cleveland?
Oh,